At 15, my parents cut me off for being pregnant. Now, 2 decades later, they want my son in court. Part 1. The Hook. I never thought I'd see my parents again. 20 years of silence can do that. It builds walls so high you forget there was ever a door. But last Tuesday, when a process server handed me legal documents with their names on them, every brick came crashing down. They weren't reaching out to apologize. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were suing for grandparents' rights to the son they pretended didn't exist. The irony? My son turns 20 next month, the same age I was when I finally stopped hoping they'd come back. Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story doesn't start with a lawsuit. It starts with a teenage girl, a positive pregnancy test, and the moment everything I knew about love shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Part 2. The Beginning. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, and I've spent more than half my life proving everyone wrong about who I was supposed to be. But at 15, I was just a sophomore at Lincoln High School in suburban Connecticut, living what I thought was a perfectly ordinary life. My parents, Richard and Patricia Whitmore, were what you'd call pillar of the community types. Dad was a corporate lawyer at one of those prestigious firms where everyone wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Mom didn't work. She volunteered, which in our social circle meant organizing charity galas and sitting on museum boards. We lived in a 6-bedroom colonial with a circular driveway, belonged to the country club, and attended the Episcopal Church every Sunday without fail. Appearance was everything. Reputation was currency, and I was their perfect daughter. Honor roll student, junior varsity tennis, piano recitals, the whole package, until I wasn't. His name was Marcus Chen. He was 16, a year ahead of me, with kind eyes and a smile that made my stomach flip. We met in the library during study hall, both reaching for the same copy of The Great Gatsby. It sounds like a movie cliché, I know, but that's exactly how it happened. He let me take the book. 2 days later, he brought me my own copy with a bookmark he'd made himself. We fell in love the way teenagers do. Intensely, completely, with no understanding of consequences. We studied together, talked for hours about everything and nothing, shared our dreams. He wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be a teacher. We made plans the way kids do, naive and beautiful in their impossibility. We were careful, or we thought we were. But careful isn't the same as perfect, and one missed pill, one moment of, it'll be fine, and suddenly your entire future rewrites itself. Part 3. The Positive Test. I took 3 tests before I accepted what I was seeing. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Too big, too real. I was 15 years old. I had a history paper due on Friday. I was supposed to be worried about homecoming dresses, not prenatal vitamins. I told Marcus first. We sat in his beat-up Honda Civic in the empty parking lot behind the grocery store, and I watched his face cycle through shock, fear, and then something that surprised me: determination. "We'll figure it out," he said, taking my shaking hands in his. "Whatever you want to do, Sarah, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I believed him. God help me, I believed him, and I loved him even more for it. Telling my parents was different. I rehearsed it 100 times in my head, trying to find words that would make it okay, that would soften the blow. There were no such words. It was a Sunday evening. We'd just gotten home from church. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. I asked them to sit down in the living room, the formal one we only used for guests. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I need to tell you something," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went pale, then red. My father just stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You're what?" Mom finally managed, her voice razor sharp. "I'm pregnant. I'm so sorry, Sorry? She stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. You're sorry? Do you have any idea what you've done? What this means? Patricia. My father started, but she wasn't finished. Who? She demanded. Who did this to you? His name is Marcus. He's a good person, Mom. I don't care if he's the Pope, she snapped. This is a disaster. An absolute disaster. What will people think? What will we tell the Hendersons? The Worthingtons? Oh God, the church ladies! Patricia, stop, my father said, his voice cold and controlled in that way that was somehow worse than yelling. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Disgust mixed with disappointment so profound it physically hurt. Sarah, how far along are you? 8 weeks, I whispered. 8 weeks. He stood, straightening his tie like we were in a business meeting. We'll handle this quietly. I'll make some calls tomorrow. There are clinics that can— No, I interrupted, surprising myself. I'm keeping the baby. The explosion that followed is burned into my memory. My mother screamed things I'd never heard her say, words I didn't know she knew. My father's face turned purple. They talked over each other, at each other, about me like I wasn't even there. Absolutely not. You'll ruin your life. You'll ruin our lives. No daughter of mine. What about college? What about your future? This is unacceptable. I stood there taking it, tears streaming down my face, until my father finally stopped pacing and looked at me with eyes like ice. You have 2 choices, Sarah. You terminate this pregnancy, we tell everyone you're away at a therapeutic boarding school for stress, and we never speak of this again. Or— He paused, letting the word hang in the air like a guillotine blade. You leave this house, you drop our name, and you figure out your life on your own. But you will not embarrass this family. Richard, maybe we should— My mother started, but he cut her off with a look. Those are her options, Patricia. She's made her choice clear. I looked at my mother, desperate for her to intervene, to be the mom who'd kissed my scraped knees and held me when I had nightmares. But she just looked away, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I'm keeping the baby, I said again, steadier this time. My father nodded once, sharp and final. Then pack your things. You have until morning. Part 4. The first night. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I moved through my room like a ghost, pulling clothes from drawers, grabbing books and photos, trying to fit 15 years of life into 2 suitcases and a backpack. I kept thinking they'd come to my room, tell me they'd overreacted, that we'd figure it out together. They never came. At 7 a.m., my father knocked once on my door. It's time. I dragged my suitcases downstairs. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes red but dry. She didn't hug me, didn't even look at me directly. The bank account we set up for your college fund has been closed, my father said, clinical as a doctor delivering bad news. Your phone will be disconnected by noon. Your car— He held out his hand, and I numbly dropped the keys into his palm. Stays here. We've contacted the school. You'll be withdrawn. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice cracking. That's no longer our concern. He opened the front door. Goodbye, Sarah. My mother turned and walked away. Just walked away, like I was a stranger she'd passed on the street. I called Marcus from the driveway, using my cell phone while it still worked. 20 minutes later, he pulled up in his Honda, his face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. He helped me load my things, and we drove away from the only home I'd ever known. I looked back once. The house stood perfect and pristine in the morning sun. All white columns and black shutters and manicured lawns. My mother watched from an upstairs window but dropped the curtain when our eyes met. I never saw that house again. Part 5. Building a new life. Marcus's parents, Helen and David Chen, were nothing like mine. When Marcus brought me home and explained what had happened, voice shaking, prepared for rejection, his mother pulled me into a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. "Oh, honey," she whispered. "Oh, you poor thing." They didn't have much. David worked as a mechanic, and Helen was a nurse. Their 3-bedroom ranch house was modest, filled with mismatched furniture and family photos in drugstore frames. But it was warm. It was home. They gave me the guest room. Really Marcus's older sister's room, since she'd left for college, and sat me down at their kitchen table over tea and homemade dumplings. "Let's talk about the reality of this situation," Helen said, not unkindly. "You're both still kids yourselves. This baby needs parents who can provide, so here's what we're going to do." She laid out a plan with the practicality of a general mapping a campaign. I'd get my GED. Marcus would finish high school. They'd help with childcare so we could both work. There were government programs, WIC, Medicaid. We'd figure it out. "But," David added, looking at both of us with serious eyes, "this means growing up fast. No more being children. You're going to be parents. That's a 24/7 job that doesn't give you breaks for being tired or scared. Are you ready for that?" We said yes. We had no idea what we were agreeing to, but we said yes. The next few months were the hardest and strangest of my life. I studied for my GED while my belly grew. I got a job at a coffee shop, lying about my age, working split shifts that left my feet swollen and my back aching. Marcus worked at his dad's garage after school, coming home covered in grease, smelling like motor oil, exhausted. We went to prenatal appointments at the free clinic. We took parenting classes at the community center. We bought baby clothes at Goodwill and assembled a crib we found on Craigslist. We grew up in fast forward, childhood ending not with a ceremony, but with a growing belly and mounting responsibilities. I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights I cried myself to sleep, mourning the life I'd lost, the parents who'd thrown me away, the future that had evaporated. I missed my old bedroom, my friends, the certainty of knowing where I belonged. I missed my mother's lasagna and my father's rare but wonderful laugh. I missed feeling safe, but I also felt something new growing inside me. Not just the baby, but something else. Strength, maybe, or spite. A determination to prove them wrong, to show that I could do this, that I was more than the disappointment they'd labeled me. Part 6. Daniel's arrival. Daniel Marcus Chen was born on March 15th, weighing 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. I was 16 years old, and I'd never been so terrified or so in love in my entire life. The labor was 36 hours of hell. Marcus held my hand the whole time, missing his final exams, not caring. When they finally placed Daniel on my chest, wrinkled and screaming and perfect, I looked down at him and made a promise. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you, and I'm never letting go." I meant it. Every word. Helen helped during those early weeks when I had no idea what I was doing. She taught me how to breastfeed when I wanted to give up, how to swaddle, how to tell the difference between hungry cries and tired cries. She stayed up with me during midnight feedings, telling me stories about raising Marcus and his sister, reassuring me that all new mothers feel like they're drowning. Marcus was a natural. He changed diapers without complaining, walked Daniel around the house at 3 a.m. singing off-key lullabies, stared at our son with an awe that mirrored my own. We took turns sleeping, eating cold pizza at odd hours, existing in that bizarre newborn fog where time stops meaning anything. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I'd think about my parents. I wondered if they thought about me, about their grandson. I imagined scenarios where they showed up at the hospital, where they apologized and wanted to meet Daniel. I played out conversations in my head, practiced what I'd say. They never came. No card, no flowers, no phone call. The silence was absolute, and it hurt worse than any words could have. But we survived. More than survived. We built a life. Part 7. The years that followed. Daniel grew from infant to toddler to child, each phase bringing new joys and challenges. Marcus and I finished our education. He got into a state school's architecture program with a partial scholarship, and I enrolled in community college, taking classes online while Daniel napped. We got married when I was 19. A small ceremony in the Chen's backyard with folding chairs and a potluck dinner. I wore a white dress from Target. Daniel, almost 3, was our ring bearer, taking his job with adorable seriousness. I didn't invite my parents, didn't even tell them. What would be the point? Marcus's parents walked us both down the aisle. I cried through my vows, not from sadness, but from gratitude. These people who owed me nothing had given me everything. Money was tight, more than tight. It was suffocating. We lived in a tiny apartment, Daniel sleeping in a corner of our bedroom. I worked as a teacher's aide during the day and tutored at night. Marcus worked at an architecture firm during the day and took freelance drafting jobs on weekends. We survived on love and coffee and the kind of exhaustion that becomes your normal. But Daniel thrived. He was bright and curious and funny, with Marcus's logical mind and what Marcus insisted was my stubborn streak. He loved dinosaurs and building blocks and asking why about everything. He called Marcus's parents Grandma and Grandpa, and they spoiled him with dollar store toys and homemade treats and unconditional love. I thought about my parents sometimes, especially on milestones. Daniel's first day of kindergarten, his first lost tooth, the school play where he played a tree and took it so seriously. I wondered if they ever thought about us, if they had regrets, if they told people they had a grandson. I stopped wondering eventually. It hurt too much. Years passed. Marcus got his architecture license. I finished my bachelor's degree, then my master's in education. We bought a small house. Nothing fancy but ours. Daniel grew into a thoughtful, kind teenager who played basketball and debated joining the robotics team. We weren't rich, but we were happy. We'd built something real from nothing. And my parents? They were ghosts. Painful memories I'd learned to live with. Scar tissue that ached on cold days, but didn't stop me from functioning. Until last Tuesday. Part 8. The lawsuit. I was at work when it happened. I teach 5th grade now, and we were in the middle of a lesson on fractions when the school secretary knocked on my door. Ms. Mitchell? There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. The process server was young, apologetic. He handed me an envelope with my name on it. Not my married name, Mitchell, but my maiden name. Whitmore. I hadn't been called that in 17 years. Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore, he said. You've been served. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Legal jargon swam before my eyes, but certain phrases jumped out, each one a punch to the gut. Petition for grandparents' visitation rights. Richard and Patricia Whitmore, petitioners. Daniel Marcus Chen, minor child. Compelling interest in establishing relationship. I had to sit down. The hallway tilted, and suddenly I was 15 again. Standing in that perfect living room, hearing my father tell me to get out. The rage came second, hot and purifying. They wanted what? I drove home in a daze, the legal papers on the passenger seat like a bomb. Marcus was already there, his own set of documents spread across the kitchen table. He looked up when I came in, his face a mixture of fury and confusion. Did you know about this? He asked. About my parents suing us? No, Marcus, that wasn't on my bingo card for today. He stood, pacing. They want court-ordered visitation. They're claiming that denying them access to Daniel is harmful to him, that he has a right to know his grandparents. They're painting us as vindictive, as keeping him from family out of spite. Spite? I laughed, the sound harsh. They threw me out when I was pregnant with him. They haven't sent a card, a letter, $1 in 20 years. They acted like he didn't exist, and now they want visitation rights? There's more. Marcus grabbed another paper. They're claiming they've attempted to establish contact multiple times over the years, that we've rejected their overtures. They're saying they've sent letters, gifts, made calls. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. You know it's a lie. But can we prove it? The question hung in the air. Could we? How do you prove something didn't happen? How do you document 20 years of silence? Daniel came home from basketball practice an hour later, sweaty and happy, talking about a shot he'd made. He stopped when he saw our faces. "What's wrong?" he asked, suddenly wary. Marcus and I exchanged a look. We'd always been honest with Daniel. We'd told him about my parents when he was old enough to understand, explained that sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love. He'd asked questions over the years. Didn't they want to meet him? Didn't they care? We'd answered as best we could, trying not to poison him against people he'd never met while also being truthful about what had happened. "Sit down, buddy," I said. "We need to talk." We told him about the lawsuit, watching emotions play across his face. Confusion first, then hurt, then anger. "They want to what? They kicked you out, and now they want to hang out with me?" He shook his head. "That's messed up." "Language," I said automatically, and he rolled his eyes. "Mom, that's literally insane. Why now? What changed?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Part 9. Investigation. I hired a lawyer, Jessica Ramirez, a family law attorney with a reputation for being tough as nails and fair as hell. She came recommended by a teacher friend who'd gone through a brutal custody battle. We met in her office downtown, surrounded by law books and files, and I told her everything. "So, 0 contact in 20 years?" She confirmed, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. 0. Not a phone call, not a letter, nothing. And now they're claiming they tried to reach out? According to the documents, yes, they're lying. Jessica tapped her pen against her lips. Grandparents' rights cases are tricky. The law varies by state, but Connecticut does allow grandparents to petition for visitation in certain circumstances. The court considers the best interest of the child, the relationship between grandparents and child, or lack thereof, and the reasons for any estrangement. So they actually have a chance? Depends on the judge, honestly, and on what we can prove or disprove about their claims of attempted contact. She leaned forward. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. Is there any possibility, any at all, that they sent something you didn't receive? Could mail have been lost? Could they have tried to call you and gotten the wrong number?" I thought about it. Really thought. No. We've lived at the same address for 12 years. Same phone numbers for longer. We're not hard to find. I'm a teacher. Marcus has his own practice now. If they wanted to reach us, they could have. Okay. Then we need to build our case. I'll need documentation. Anything that proves the lack of relationship. School records showing emergency contacts, medical records, any documentation of Daniel's life that would typically include grandparents. Photos, birthday parties, graduations. We need to show the court that these people are strangers to Daniel, not doting grandparents being cruelly kept at bay. Over the next few weeks, I dove into 20 years of memories, each one a reminder of my parents' absence. Daniel's baby book, filled with photos of Helen and David, but no space left for Richard and Patricia. Elementary school forms listing Marcus's parents as emergency contacts, as the people to call for school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Birthday party photos where Grandma and Grandpa appeared in every shot. But they were the Chens. I created a timeline, documenting every milestone they'd missed. First words, first steps, first day of school, school concerts, soccer games, the time Daniel broke his arm falling off his bike, his 13th birthday party, his high school acceptance letter. Each entry felt like opening an old wound. Not because I'd missed them, I'd stopped missing them years ago, but because of what their absence said. They'd chosen pride over love, image over family. They'd made that choice every single day for 20 years. And now they wanted to waltz back in and play grandparents? Part 10. The Discovery. The answer to why came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, one of my mother's country club friends. I ran into her at the grocery store, almost literally, our carts colliding in the frozen food aisle. Sarah? Sarah Whitmore? She squinted at me over her reading glasses. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen you since, well, in years. I'd frozen, hand on my cart, fight or flight kicking in. Mrs. Henderson had been one of those women, the lunch ladies who ruled the social scene, who decided who was in and who was out. It's Sarah Mitchell now, I said carefully. Of course, of course. I heard you got married. And you have a son, isn't that right? How did she know that? My guard went up immediately. Yes, Daniel, he's 19. Oh, how wonderful. Your mother must be so proud. She stopped abruptly, her face flushing. I mean, I'm sure she would be, if, well, you know. If she hadn't disowned me? Yes. I imagine she might be. Mrs. Henderson fidgeted with her purse. I probably shouldn't say anything, but... Well, Patricia speaks about you and your son at the club sometimes. She says you won't let her see her grandson, that you're being vindictive about some old disagreement. My blood pressure spiked. Old disagreement? Is that what she's calling it? I don't know the details, dear. I just know she seems quite sad about it. And with Richard's health issues lately, she's been even more vocal about wanting to make amends before it's too late. Wait, what health issues? Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. Oh, you don't know. I thought surely... She sighed. Your father had a heart attack 3 months ago. Quite serious. He's recovering, but it gave them both quite a scare. I think that's why Patricia is so keen on reconciling. And there it was, the missing piece. They weren't trying to make things right. They were trying to ease their consciences before the inevitable. My father was facing his mortality and suddenly remembered he had a daughter and grandson he'd thrown away. Part 11. The Deposition. The deposition took place in a sterile conference room that smelled like old coffee and desperation. My parents sat across from me, my father grayer and thinner than I remembered, my mother's face tight with Botox and barely concealed tension. It was the first time I'd seen them in 20 years. I'd prepared myself for this moment, rehearsed staying calm, keeping my emotions in check. But seeing them in person, older, smaller somehow, yet still radiating that same aura of superiority. I felt 15 again, small and scared and desperate for their approval. Then my father's lawyer started talking, and the spell broke. Ms. Mitchell, he began, his tone suggesting I was on trial for murder rather than refusing to let strangers meet my son. Can you explain to us why you've systematically prevented my clients from having any relationship with their grandson? Jessica jumped in before I could respond. Objection to the characterization. My client hasn't prevented anything. Your clients abandoned their pregnant teenage daughter and have made 0 attempts to contact her or her child in 20 years. That's simply not true, my mother interjected, her voice the same sharp instrument I remembered. We've tried repeatedly to reach out. Really? I said, unable to stop myself. When? Where are the letters? The emails? The phone calls? My father's lawyer smiled, and I knew we were in trouble. He pulled out a stack of papers. These are copies of letters my clients claim to have sent over the years, birthday cards, Christmas cards, attempts to establish contact. I stared at the documents. They looked legitimate. Cards addressed to Daniel, letters apologizing to me, all dated over the past 19 years. My hands went cold. I never received any of these, I said. Or perhaps you simply discarded them, the lawyer suggested smoothly. Perhaps you were so committed to your grudge that you destroyed any attempts at reconciliation. I wouldn't. Jessica put a hand on my arm. We'll need to examine these documents, verify postmarks, analyze the paper and ink, confirm authenticity. The lawyer smirked. Of course, we expected as much. The rest of the deposition was a blur. They asked about my relationship with my parents before the pregnancy, painting a picture of a loving family torn apart by a rebellious teenager. They asked about my life now, suggesting that my modest teacher's salary and small house proved I couldn't provide adequately, that Daniel would benefit from knowing his affluent, accomplished grandparents. They asked about Daniel's relationship with Marcus's parents, twisting it into something sinister, suggesting we'd replace them with a substitute family, depriving Daniel of his real heritage. Through it all, my parents sat silent. My mother dabbed at her eyes occasionally with a tissue, the perfect picture of a grieving grandmother. My father looked tired and sad, playing the role of regretful parent perfectly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and tell them exactly what they'd done to me. How many nights I'd cried myself to sleep, how many times I'd needed my mother and she wasn't there. But I sat still, answered questions, and let my lawyer do her job. When it was finally over, as we were packing up to leave, my mother approached me. Up close, I could see the lines makeup didn't quite hide, the tremor in her hands. "Sarah," she said quietly, "please, we just want to meet him. We made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but don't punish Daniel for our sins." "Punish Daniel?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You think I'm punishing him by not letting strangers into his life? You had 19 years to be his grandmother. You chose not to be. You don't get to change your mind now because Dad had a heart attack and you're worried about your legacy." Her face hardened. "You always were dramatic. This is exactly why we couldn't." "Couldn't what? Couldn't love me? Couldn't accept that I made a mistake? I was 15 years old, and you threw me away like garbage." "We gave you options," my father said, standing now, his lawyer's hand on his arm in warning. "You made your choice. I chose my son. I chose love over image, and that's something you'll never understand." I walked out, shaking so hard Marcus had to drive us home. Part 12. The investigation results. Jessica called a week later with news. "The documents are fake." "What?" "Well, not entirely fake. They're real cards and letters, but they were never mailed. The paper analysis came back. The oldest letter is printed on paper that wasn't manufactured until 3 years ago. Several of the birthday cards feature cartoon characters that didn't exist when they were supposedly sent. And most damning, none of them have legitimate postmarks. They tried to fake it, but the Postal Service has specific marks that are nearly impossible to replicate perfectly. These were never sent through the mail. I sank into a chair, relief and rage warring in my chest. So they lied? They created fake evidence. Yes. And that's going to destroy their case. A judge doesn't take kindly to fabricated evidence. But Sarah, there's more. More? I did some digging into why they're doing this now. You mentioned your father's health issues. It turns out he's not just sick, he's dying. Advanced heart disease, probably has a year, maybe 2. And here's the kicker. They recently changed their estate plan. Significant money, trust funds, property. They're trying to include Daniel as a beneficiary. My head spun. They want to leave him money? Not just money, We're talking millions. Your father has been very successful, and they have no other grandchildren. I think they want to ease their guilt and leave a legacy. But to do that, they need to establish a relationship. They can't just leave money to a stranger. It looks bad, opens up challenges. But if they can prove they have an active relationship with their grandson, it legitimizes everything. So this isn't about Daniel at all. It's about them. It's always about them, Sarah. People like your parents don't change. They just get better at hiding their motivations. Part 13. Daniel's decision. That night, I sat Daniel down and told him everything. About the fake letters, about his grandfather's illness, about the money. I'd always been honest with him, and I wasn't going to stop now, even when the truth was complicated. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. When I finished, he sat for a long moment, processing. So they want to meet me because Grandpa Richard is dying, and they want to feel better about themselves, he finally said. That's one interpretation. What's another interpretation? I thought about it. Maybe they genuinely regret what they did. Maybe facing death makes people reevaluate their choices. Maybe they really do want to know you. But they're lying about sending letters. Yes. And they didn't care about me for 19 years. Also, yes. He stood, pacing like his father did when thinking hard. What do you want me to do? This isn't about what I want, baby. It's about what's best for you. Don't call me baby, I'm 19, he said automatically, then smiled slightly. But seriously, Mom, they hurt you. They threw you out when you needed them most. Why would I want to meet them? Because they're your grandparents, and maybe everyone deserves a second chance. Or because knowing them might answer questions you have. Or because meeting them once, on your terms, might give you closure. I paused. Or because there's a lot of money involved, and I'd be a terrible parent if I didn't mention that. He laughed, sharp and short. I don't want their money. You say that now, but college loans are real and that money could... Mom. He sat back down, taking my hands. You and Dad raised me. You worked yourselves to the bone so I could have a good life. Grandma Helen and Grandpa David have been at every game, every concert, every important moment. Those are my grandparents, not some rich people who couldn't be bothered to know I existed until it was convenient for them. Tears streamed down my face. I'm so proud of you. I learned from the best. He squeezed my hands. But I do want to meet them. Once. Not because I want a relationship, but because I want them to see what they missed. I want them to know exactly who I am and understand what they threw away. Are you sure? I'm sure. But on my terms, not in court, not with lawyers, just a conversation. Can we do that? Part 14. The meeting. Jessica arranged it. Neutral territory, a conference room at her office, just Daniel, my parents, and a mediator. Marcus and I waited in the lobby, unable to sit still, wearing a track in the carpet with our pacing. Later, Daniel told us what happened. My parents arrived dressed like they were attending a business meeting, my father in a three-piece suit despite his health. My mother in pearls and a dress that probably cost more than our mortgage payment. They looked at Daniel like they were seeing a ghost. You look like Sarah, my mother said, her voice cracking. I look like my mom, yeah, Daniel corrected. You must be Patricia and Richard. Not calling them Grandma and Grandpa. I loved him even more for that. They talked for an hour. My parents asked questions about his life, and Daniel answered politely but without warmth. He told them about school, about his interest in environmental science, about his friends. He showed them photos on his phone, his quinceañera surprise party. Marcus's family is big on celebrations. His basketball team, his family. That's Helen and David, he said, showing a picture from last Christmas. My grandparents. We're your grandparents. my father said stiffly. No, Daniel replied, not unkindly but firmly. You're my mother's parents. There's a difference. Grandparents show up. They care. They're there when things are hard. You weren't. My mother tried a different approach. We made terrible mistakes, Daniel. We were wrong. We let our pride and our fear of what people would think destroy our family. But we want to make it right now. We want to be part of your life. Why now? Daniel asked. Is it because Grandpa Richard is sick? The silence was damning. Finally, my father spoke. Yes, facing death makes you confront your regrets. I have many, but the biggest is losing your mother. Losing you. You didn't lose us, Daniel said quietly. You threw us away. There's a difference. We'd like to make amends, my mother pressed. We've set up a trust fund for you, for college, for your future. We want to help. Daniel leaned back in his chair, and I can imagine the look on his face, so much like Marcus when he's disappointed but trying to hide it. Let me get this straight. You didn't want me when I was a baby. You didn't care when I learned to walk or talk or read. You missed every birthday, every Christmas, every moment that mattered. But now that Grandpa's dying, you want to buy your way into my life? It's not like that, my father started. It's exactly like that, Daniel interrupted. And you know what? I don't need your money. I have scholarships, I have my parents, I have a family that actually loves me. What I don't have is grandparents who threw my mom out when she was pregnant with me. What I don't have is people who lied in court and faked letters to try to force their way into my life. You know about that? My mother whispered. Of course I know. You think my mom wouldn't tell me? She's always been honest with me, even when the truth hurt. That's what real parents do. My father's face was gray, and not just from illness. What do you want from us then? Why agree to this meeting if you won't even consider? I wanted to meet you so I could tell you to your faces that I don't need you, Daniel said, standing up. I wanted you to see the person I became without you. I wanted you to know that my mom is the strongest, most amazing person I know. And she raised me right despite you abandoning her. I wanted you to understand what you lost. He walked to the door, then turned back. And I wanted to tell you that I forgive you. Not for your sake, for mine and my mom's. Carrying around anger at people who don't matter is exhausting. So I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you in my life. It just means I'm done letting your choices affect mine. He left them sitting there, and he told me later that my mother was crying and my father just stared at the table, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Part 15. The Court Hearing. The court hearing was almost anticlimactic after that. Jessica presented our evidence, the timeline of absence, the fake letters, the testimony from Daniel himself about wanting no relationship with his grandparents. She painted a picture of parents trying to buy their way out of guilt with money and manufactured concern. My parents' lawyer tried to argue that Daniel had been poisoned against them, that he'd been too young to make his own decisions. The judge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, shut that down immediately. Mr. Chen is 19 years old, Judge Matthews said. He's an adult who can speak for himself, and he's been quite clear about his wishes. The court has reviewed the evidence, including the questionable authenticity of the supposed correspondence, and finds that the petitioners have not demonstrated a pre-existing relationship with the minor, now adult child that would warrant court-ordered visitation. My father stood, his lawyer trying to stop him. Your Honor, please. I'm dying. I just want to know my grandson before... Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, not unkindly but firmly. I understand you're facing difficult circumstances, but you can't force a relationship, especially not after 20 years of absence. Your grandson has made his position clear. The court cannot and will not compel him to see you. But the trust fund, my mother started. The trust fund is a separate matter, Judge Matthews said. You're free to leave your estate however you wish, but you cannot use money to leverage a relationship. Motion for grandparents' visitation rights is denied. The gavel came down, and it was over. We stood to leave, and I felt lighter than I had in weeks. But as we walked past my parents' table, my father called out, "Sarah, please." I stopped against my better judgment. Marcus's hand found mine, steadying me. My father looked old, not just sick, but defeated. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for what I did, for all of it. You were our daughter, and we failed you. We failed ourselves. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to hear that I know what we did was unforgivable." Part of me, the 15-year-old girl who desperately wanted her daddy's love, wanted to hug him and say it was okay. But it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "But sorry doesn't give me back the years I needed a mother. It doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep or the times I went without so Daniel could have what he needed. It doesn't erase the fact that you chose your reputation over your family." "I know," he whispered. "I hope you find peace," I said, and I meant it. "But you won't find it with us." Marcus, Daniel, and I walked out of that courtroom together, a united front. Behind us, I heard my mother sobbing, but I didn't look back. I'd looked back once, 20 years ago, and it had cost me too much. Part 16. Aftermath. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets. Daniel started his sophomore year of college, majoring in environmental science with a minor in sustainable development. Marcus's architecture firm landed a major contract designing a new community center. I got promoted to lead teacher for my grade level. About 6 months after the court case, I received a letter from my father's estate attorney. My father had passed away peacefully in his sleep, his heart finally giving out. Despite everything, I cried, not for the man he'd become, but for the father I'd loved when I was small, before I understood that love could be conditional. The letter included information about the trust fund they'd set up for Daniel. Millions of dollars, held in trust until he turned 25. There was a note attached in my father's handwriting, shaky but legible. "Daniel, I know you said you didn't want this. I know I have no right to give you anything after giving you nothing for so long. But this is the only way I know how to say I'm sorry. Use it or don't use it. The choice is yours. But know that in my last days I thought about you every day and regretted every day I missed. You're a remarkable young man, and that's entirely because of your mother. She was braver at 15 than I ever was. I'm proud of her, even if I never told her. I'm proud of you, even though I never earned the right to be. Forgive me if you can. If you can't, I understand. Richard Whitmore." Daniel read it, then carefully folded it and put it in his desk drawer. "I'll think about the money," he said. "Maybe I'll use it for grad school, or maybe I'll donate it to organizations that help teen parents. I don't know yet." "You don't have to decide now," I told him. "I know, but Mom?" He looked at me with those eyes that had seen me through everything. "Are you okay? I know he was awful to you, but he was still your dad." "I'm okay," I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. I mourned losing him a long time ago. This is just making it official. Do you think he really changed at the end? That he really was sorry? I thought about it. I think people can be genuinely sorry and still not deserve forgiveness. I think he probably did regret his choices. But regret doesn't undo harm, you know? It doesn't entitle you to reconciliation. Heavy stuff. Yeah, well, you're the one taking philosophy classes now. You tell me, can you forgive someone and still not want them in your life? Absolutely, he said without hesitation. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from anger. It doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen or opening yourself up to being hurt again. When did you get so wise? He grinned. I had good teachers. Part 17. The letter I never sent. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I wrote a letter to my mother. Not to send, just to say all the things I'd kept locked inside for 20 years. Dear Mom, Dad's gone and I keep wondering if you feel what I feel. This strange grief for someone who stopped being a parent long before they died. Do you miss him? Do you miss me? I've been thinking about what you said in court, that you made mistakes. That's such a small word for such a big betrayal, don't you think? A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is showing up late. What you did? That was a choice. A series of choices, made over and over again for 20 years. I want you to know what those choices meant. When Daniel was born, I was so scared I could barely breathe. I was 16 years old, and I had no idea what I was doing. I needed my mother. I called our old number once, about a week after he was born. It was disconnected. I guess you changed it so I couldn't reach you. That hurt worse than the labor. I needed you when Daniel got sick at 6 months with a fever so high I thought I'd lose him. I needed you when he started kindergarten and I cried in the parking lot because my baby was growing up. I needed you when Marcus and I almost split up during that terrible year when money was so tight we were choosing between electricity and food. But you weren't there. Helen was there. Helen, who had her own children and her own life, but who made room for one more daughter anyway. She taught me how to be a mother. She held me when I fell apart. She celebrated with me when things went right. Do you know what Daniel's first word was? Mama. And I cried because I was so happy he had a mama who loved him, and so sad because I'd lost mine. I want to be angry at you. I want to hate you for what you stole from both of us. But mostly I just feel tired. Tired of carrying this weight. Tired of wondering what if. Tired of grieving people who are still alive. So here's what I need to tell you. I forgive you. Not because you asked for it or because you deserve it, but because I can't carry this anymore. I forgive you for choosing reputation over love. I forgive you for prioritizing what the neighbors thought over what your daughter needed. I forgive you for missing out on knowing the most amazing kid I've ever met. But here's the thing about forgiveness. It doesn't mean I want you in my life. It doesn't mean I trust you. It doesn't mean we're going to have some tearful reunion where everything is magically okay. It just means I'm done letting your choices control my emotions. I built a good life without you. A better life, maybe, than I would have had in that perfect house with its perfect facade. I learned what real love looks like. The messy, exhausting, beautiful kind that shows up at 3 a.m. and doesn't keep score. I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about showing up. I hope you're okay. I hope you find whatever peace you're looking for. But I hope you understand that peace doesn't include me or Daniel. We're doing just fine without you. Take care of yourself, Sarah. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and filed it away in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I'd send it. Maybe I wouldn't. But writing it felt like setting down a burden I'd been carrying for 20 years. Part 18. Full circle. A year later, I got another letter from the estate attorney. My mother wanted to see me. Just once. She was selling the house. Too big, too many memories. And she wanted to give me something before it was gone. I almost didn't go. Marcus said it was my choice, that he'd support whatever I decided. Daniel said the same. But Helen, wise, wonderful Helen, said something that stuck with me. Closure isn't for them, she said over tea in her kitchen. The same kitchen where she'd first welcomed me all those years ago. It's for you. You don't owe her anything. but maybe you owe yourself the chance to close this chapter completely. So I went. Alone this time. This was my past to confront, not my family's burden to carry. The house looked the same. Perfect lawn, white columns, black shutters. But smaller somehow, less intimidating. Or maybe I was just bigger. My mother answered the door, and I barely recognized her. She'd aged dramatically in the year since the court case. Grief and guilt etched into every line of her face. Her hair was completely white now, pulled back in a simple bun instead of her usual salon style. "Sarah," she breathed. "You came." I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't. She stepped back. "Come in, please." The house was full of boxes, my childhood, packed away for strangers to buy. It felt surreal, walking through rooms I'd once known so well, seeing them stripped of their perfection. "I'm moving to a condo," my mother said, leading me to the living room. The same room where my life had changed 20 years ago. "This place is too much for one person. Too many ghosts." We sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. "I wanted to see you because I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave it to me. I wanted to see you because I need you to know that your father was right. We failed. We failed so spectacularly that we lost everything that mattered." "You didn't lose everything," I said quietly. "You had each other. You had your reputation, your friends, your perfect life." "We had nothing," she said fiercely. "Don't you understand? Everything we thought mattered was empty. The clubs, the parties, the perfect house, it was all meaningless without you. We realized it too late, and we realized it wrong. We tried to fix it with money and lawyers instead of just being honest." She reached into a box beside her chair and pulled out a photo album. "I want you to have this." I opened it slowly. It was full of photos of me, baby pictures, childhood snapshots, school photos. Me at every age, every stage, carefully preserved and organized. My throat tightened. "I've looked at this every day since you left," she said. "Every single day. I'd remember the girl you were and wonder about the woman you became. After the court case, I started following you online. I hope that doesn't sound creepy. I saw your teaching awards, your publications in education journals. I saw Daniel's robotics team win the state championship. I saw your family, your real family, the Chens, celebrating holidays and birthdays. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that I know what I missed. I want you to know that it destroyed me, not all at once, slowly, day by day, year by year. Your father and I blamed each other. We grew bitter and cold. Our marriage became a shell. We lived in this beautiful house, and we were miserable." She took a shaky breath. "When Richard got sick, he begged me to reach out to you. To be honest, to apologize, to try to make amends the right way. But I was still too proud. I suggested the legal route, the trust fund, all of it. I thought we could fix it without really facing what we'd done. He went along with it because he was desperate, but it was my idea. It was always my pride that was the problem." "Mom?" I started, then caught myself. She wasn't my mom. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. But she caught it, and her face crumpled. "I heard that. You called me Mom." Force of habit. "Don't take it back," she whispered. "Please, let me have that one moment." We sat there, two women separated by choices and time and pain, and something in me shifted. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation. But maybe understanding. "I can't give you what you want," I said finally. "I can't be your daughter again. That ship sailed 20 years ago. But I can tell you that I turned out okay. Better than okay." I have a family who loves me, a job I'm passionate about, a son who's everything I could have hoped for. You didn't destroy me, even though you tried. I never wanted to destroy you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to protect our family's image, our standing. I thought that's what mattered. I was so wrong. Yes, you were. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about the letter I'd written, still sitting in my desk drawer. About the forgiveness I'd already granted, not for her sake, but for mine. I already have, I said. But that doesn't change anything between us. Forgiveness and relationship are two different things. I forgive you for being human, for making terrible choices, for being selfish and scared. But I don't want you in my life. It's too late for that. She nodded, accepting. I understand. But can I ask one thing? Can you give this to Daniel? She handed me an envelope. It's not money. It's just a letter. From a grandmother who never got to be one. He doesn't have to read it. He doesn't have to respond. But I'd like him to have the choice. I took the envelope. I'll give it to him. What he does with it is up to him. Thank you. She walked me to the door and we stood there awkwardly, not knowing how to say goodbye. Sarah, she said as I turned to leave. You were right. That day in court, when you said I chose my reputation over my family. You were absolutely right, and I've paid for it every day since. I hope your life is wonderful. I hope you're happy. I am, I said, and I meant it. I drove home, the envelope and photo album on the passenger seat. When I got there, Marcus and Daniel were in the kitchen making dinner, arguing cheerfully about whether more garlic is always better, Daniel's position, or sometimes you need restraint, Marcus's losing battle. I stood in the doorway watching them, these two men who were my whole world, and I felt nothing but gratitude. My parents gave me life, but they didn't give me this. This I built myself, with love and stubbornness, and the help of people who showed up when it mattered. Hey, Mom, Daniel called, spotting me. How'd it go? Okay, I said. Better than expected, actually. She gave me this for you. I handed him the envelope. He looked at it for a long moment, then set it aside. I'll read it later. Maybe. Right now, dinner's almost ready, and we're celebrating. Celebrating what? Marcus landed the contract for that affordable housing project, the one he's been working on for months. I hugged Marcus, feeling his pride and relief. This was what mattered. Not the past, not what could have been, but this moment, this family, this life we'd chosen. Later that night, after dinner and celebration and Daniel going to his apartment, Marcus found me in our bedroom, staring at the photo album. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Yeah, I said, and realized it was true. I think I finally am. For real this time. No regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the life I might have had if my parents had supported me. The college I might have attended, the career I might have had. The easier path that had been yanked away. But I also thought about the life I did have. The love I'd found. The son I'd raised. The strength I'd discovered. The family I'd chosen. No regrets, I said firmly. If I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. Because then I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have us. Good answer, Marcus murmured into my hair. Part 19. Daniel's Choice. A week later, Daniel came over for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd started years ago and maintained even after he moved out. Over Helen's famous dumplings, she'd taught me how to make them, but hers were still better, he brought up the letter. I read it, he said. Grandma Patricia's letter. And? It was sad. She talked about all the things she wished she'd done differently. all the moments she missed. She apologized for not being there, for not fighting harder to be part of my life. She said she understood if I never wanted to see her, but she hoped I'd know that she loved me, even though she never got to show it. How do you feel about that? He shrugged. Honestly? I don't know. Part of me feels bad for her. She clearly has a lot of regrets, but the other part of me thinks, too little, too late, you know? You don't get points for loving someone in theory when you refuse to love them in practice. Very philosophical, Marcus said, proud. I'm taking an ethics class. Daniel grinned, then sobered. But here's the thing, she asked if she could write to me sometimes. Just letters, no expectations of responses or visits. She said she'd like to tell me about you, Mom. About what you were like as a kid. About the family history. She said she knows it's selfish, but it would give her comfort in her last years. What did you tell her? I asked, my heart in my throat. I haven't told her anything yet. I wanted to ask you first. Would it hurt you if I said yes? I'm not going to visit her or build a relationship. But letters. I don't know. Maybe it would help me understand where I come from. I looked at my son, this incredible young man who'd grown into someone thoughtful and kind despite, or maybe because of, everything we'd been through. He was asking my permission, but we'd raised him to make his own choices. Daniel, you're an adult. You don't need my permission. I know, but you're my mom, and I don't want to hurt you. Baby, I said, forgetting he hated the nickname. You could never hurt me by being curious about your family history. If you want to let her write to you, that's your choice. Just protect yourself, okay? Don't let her guilt you into more than you're comfortable with. I won't, he promised. Besides, I have you and Dad to keep me grounded, and Grandma Helen would never let me get away with any nonsense. We all laughed at that. Helen was many things, but pushover wasn't one of them. I think I'll tell her she can write, Daniel said. Maybe once a month, and I'll read the letters, but I'm not promising to respond. Is that fair? More than fair, I said. It's generous. I learned from the best, he said, echoing what he'd told me years ago. Part 20. Moving forward. Life has a funny way of working out. Not necessarily how you planned, but how you needed. My mother writes to Daniel once a month, like clockwork. True to his word, he reads the letters but rarely responds. Sometimes he shares them with me. Stories about my childhood, about my grandparents, about a family history I never knew. It's strange, learning about my past through my son. My mother writes about her own parents, strict and cold, and I begin to understand where she learned that love was conditional. She writes about the pressure she felt to be perfect, to maintain appearances. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it contextualizes it. Understanding isn't forgiveness. I'd already forgiven her. And it's not reconciliation. I still don't want her in my life. It's just perspective. The understanding that hurt people, and cycles continue until someone is brave enough to break them. I broke the cycle. When I could have thrown Daniel's mistakes back in his face, when he struggled in school or made poor choices or acted like a typical teenager, I chose love. I chose showing up. I chose being the parent I'd needed and never had. Marcus and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary last month. 20 years of marriage, 21 years of being parents, 21 years of building a life from nothing. We renewed our vows in Helen and David's backyard, the same place we'd married the first time, surrounded by the family we'd created. Daniel gave a speech that had everyone crying. He talked about what real love looks like, the kind that shows up at 2 a.m. when you're scared, the kind that works 3 jobs so you can go to college, the kind that chooses you every single day regardless of circumstances. My mom was 15 when she got pregnant with me. he said, his voice strong and clear. She could have given up. She could have been bitter. She could have made me feel like a burden. Instead, she loved me so fiercely that I never once doubted I was wanted. She and my dad built a family from scratch, and they taught me that family isn't about biology or money or perfection. It's about showing up. It's about love in action, not just in words. He looked at Helen and David. And my grandparents, my real grandparents, they showed me that family is about choice. They chose to love my mom when her own parents wouldn't. They chose to love me before I was even born. They chose us every day, and that's what makes them family. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Later, as Marcus and I danced to the same song we'd danced to 20 years ago, played on someone's phone instead of a DJ because we were still decidedly not fancy, he whispered in my ear, "We did it, Sarah. We actually did it." Did what? Built something beautiful, made it work, raised an incredible kid, proved everyone wrong. I laughed, thinking about that terrified 15-year-old girl with a positive pregnancy test and the whole world telling her she was making a mistake. We really did, didn't we? Any regrets? He asked, like he did sometimes, always checking in, always making sure. I looked around at the backyard full of people who loved us, Marcus's extended family, my work friends who'd become real friends, Daniel's friends from college who'd been absorbed into our chaotic family dinners, Helen and David holding court at a table and telling embarrassing stories about all of us. Not a single one, I said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Epilogue. 20 years later. My mother passed away last year, quietly in her sleep. Daniel was with her. He'd started visiting after 3 years of letters, not because he owed her anything, but because he's a better person than most. He held her hand and told her about his graduate research in sustainable development. She died smiling, he said. She left him her portion of the estate. Not as a bribe this time, but as a genuine gift with no strings attached. Daniel donated most of it to organizations supporting teen parents, but he kept some for his future. Maybe a house someday, maybe his own kids' college funds. I didn't go to her funeral. I'd said my goodbyes years ago, and I didn't need the closure of watching her be buried. But I sent flowers, white roses, her favorite, with a card that said simply, "Rest well." Daniel spoke at the service. He told the assembled crowd, mostly my mother's society friends, people I'd never met and never would, that she'd made mistakes but spent her final years trying to atone, that she'd never gotten the reconciliation she wanted, but she'd found a kind of peace in the letters they'd exchanged, that she'd loved from a distance, and sometimes that was all you could do. He's generous, my son, more generous than I could be. Last week, Daniel brought his girlfriend to dinner. Her name is Aisha, and she's brilliant and funny and kind. She's also pregnant, 8 weeks along. I held my breath waiting for Daniel's news, remembering how I'd felt at his age, terrified and uncertain. But when he told us, his face was nothing but joy. "We're having a baby," he said, Aisha's hand in his. "We know it's not perfect timing. I'm still in grad school. Aisha's starting her residency. But we want this. We're ready." Marcus and I looked at each other, a whole conversation in a glance, then stood and hugged them both. "We're so happy for you," I said, meaning it. "And we're here. Whatever you need." "I know," Daniel said. "I've always known. That's why I'm not scared." Later, after they left, Marcus found me in the kitchen, crying quietly. "Hey," he said, wrapping me in his arms. "What's wrong? I thought you were happy about the baby." "I am," I said. "I'm crying because Daniel said he's not scared. Because he knows we're here. Because he grew up so loved and supported that facing this huge life change doesn't terrify him." "That's a good thing," Marcus said, confused. "It is," I agreed. "It's the best thing. It means we broke the cycle. We gave him what we didn't have, and now he gets to start his family with confidence instead of fear. It means we won. Marcus held me tighter. We definitely won. I thought about my parents then, about the choices they'd made and the prices they'd paid. About my mother dying with regrets, and my father going to his grave having missed everything that mattered. About the grandson they'd wanted to know, but never really earned the right to. And I thought about the life I'd built despite them. Because of them, maybe. About the family I'd chosen and the love I'd found, and the strength I'd discovered in myself when I had no other choice. My parents cut me off for being pregnant at 15. They tried to shame me back into line. And when that didn't work, they erased me from their lives. They thought they were punishing me. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about consequences. But the real lesson was one they never learned. That love isn't about control or conditions or appearances. It's about showing up, especially when it's hard. It's about choosing your people every single day and standing by them when the world says you shouldn't. I'm 35 years old now. My son is about to be a father. My husband still makes me laugh after 20 years of marriage. My life is messy and chaotic and absolutely nothing like what I'd planned when I was a perfect honor roll student living in that perfect house. It's so much better. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was 15 when I got pregnant. I'm 35 now, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. Not because I recommend anyone else take this path. I don't. But because that terrified 15-year-old girl made a choice that changed everything. And every hard day, every struggle, every moment of doubt led me here. To a life full of love. To a family built on choice. To breaking cycles and building better ones. To proving that sometimes the people who give birth to you aren't your real parents. Your real parents are the ones who show up. 20 years later, my parents wanted my son in court. They wanted to force their way into a life they'd rejected. They wanted to buy their way out of guilt and into legacy. They lost. Not because the judge ruled against them, though she did. They lost because they'd already lost everything that mattered 20 years ago when they chose their pride over their daughter. They just took 20 years to realize it. I won because I chose differently. Every day, in every way, I chose love. And that made all the difference.